Yeah, I think in the long arc of human history, probably natural phenomena is the right solution. That's the elegant solution because all the power is already there. That's why a Dyson sphere in the long sort of, but you don't know what a Dyson sphere would look like, but some kind of thing that leverages the power, the energy that's already in the sun is better than creating artificial nuclear fusion reaction. But then again, that brings us to the topic of AI. How much of this, if we're traveling out there, interstellar travel, or doing some of the interesting things we've been talking about, how much of those ships would be occupied by AI systems, do you think? What would be the living organisms occupying those ships?
Yeah, it's depressing to think about AI in the search for life because it has. I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot over the last few weeks with playing around with ChatGPT-3, like many of us, and being astonished with its capabilities. And you see that our society is undergoing a change that seems significant in terms of the development of artificial intelligence. We've been promised this revolution, this singularity for a long time, but it really seems to be stepping up its pace of development at this point. And so that's interesting because as someone who looks for alien life out there in the universe, it sort of implies that our current stage of development is highly transitional, and that, you know, you go back for the last 4.5 billion years, the planet was dumb, essentially. If you go back the last few thousand years, there was a civilization, but it wasn't really producing any techno signatures. And then over the last maybe 100 years, there's been something that might be detectable from afar. But we're approaching this cusp where we might imagine it. I mean, we're thinking of like maybe years and decades with AI development, typically when we talk about this. But as an astronomer, I have to think about much longer timescales of centuries, millennia, millions of years. And so if this wave continues over that timescale, which is still the blink of an eye on a cosmic timescale, that implies that everything will be AI essentially out there, if this is a common behavior. And so that's intriguing because it sort of implies that we are special in terms of our moment in time as a civilization, which it normally is something we're averse to as astronomers. We normally like this mediocrity principle. We're not special. We're a typical part of the universe. It's sometimes the cosmological principle. But in a temporal sense, we may be in a unique location. And perhaps that is part of a solution to the Fermi paradox, in fact, that if it is true that planets tend to go through basically 3 phases, dumb life for the vast majority, a brief period of biological intelligence, and then an extended period of artificial intelligence that they transition to, then we would be in a unique and special moment in galactic history that would be of particular interest for any anthropologists out there in the galaxy, right? This would be the time that you would want to study a civilization very carefully. You wouldn't want to interfere with it. You would just want to see how it plays out. Kind of similar to the ancestor simulations that I sometimes talked about with the simulation argument, that you are able to observe perhaps your own origins and study how the transformation happens. And so, yeah, that has for me recently been throwing the Fermi paradox a bit on its head. And this idea of the zoo hypothesis that we may be monitored, which has for a long time been sort of seen as a fringe idea, even amongst the SETI community. But if we live in this truly transitional period, it adds a lot of impetus to that idea, I think.
Well, even AI itself would, by its very nature, would be observing us. By, it's like human. There used to be this concept of human computation, which is actually exactly what's feeding the current chat language models, which is leveraging all the busy stuff we're doing to do the hard work of learning. So like the language models are trained on human interaction and human language on the internet. And so AI feeds on the output of brain power from humans. And so like it would be observing, and it gets stronger as it observes. So it actually gets extremely good at observing humans. And one of the interesting philosophical questions that starts percolating is what is the interesting thing that makes us human? We tend to think of it, and you said like there's 3 phases. What's the thing that's hard to come by in phase 3? Is it something like scarcity, which is limited resources? Is it something like consciousness? Is that the thing that's very that emerged the evolutionary process in biological systems that are operating under constrained resources? This thing that it feels like something to experience the world, which we think of as consciousness, is that really difficult to replicate? Is in artificial systems? Is that the thing that makes us fundamentally human, or is it just a side effect that we attribute way too much importance to? Do you have a sense? If we look out into the future, and AI systems are the ones that are traveling out there to Alpha Centauri and beyond, do you think they have to carry the flame of consciousness with them?
No, not necessarily. They may do, but it may not be necessarily. I mean, I guess we're talking about the difference here between sort of an AGI, artificial general intelligence, or consciousness, which are distinct ideas, and you can certainly have one without the other. So I could imagine.
I would disagree with this certainly in that statement.
Okay.
I think it's very possible in order to have intelligence, you have to have consciousness.
Okay. Well, I mean, to a certain degree, GPT-3 has a level of intelligence already. It's not a general intelligence, but it displays properties of intelligence with no consciousness. So
again, I would disagree.
Okay. Well, I don't know.
Because you said, it's very nice. You said it displays properties of intelligence. Mm-hmm. In the same way it displays properties of intelligence, I would say it's starting to display properties of consciousness. It certainly could fool you that it's conscious.
Correct. Yeah. So there's, I guess, like a Turing test problem. Like if it's displaying all those properties, if it quacks like a parrot, looks like a parrot, or quacks like a duck, sings like isn't it basically a duck at that point? So yeah, I can see that argument. It probably, I mean, certainly I try to think about it from the observer's point of view as an astronomer. What am I looking for? Whether that intelligence is conscious or not has little bearing, I think, as to what I should be looking for when I'm trying to detect evidence of them. It would maybe affect their behavior in ways that I can't predict. But that's, again, getting into the game of what I would call xenopsychology, of trying to make projections about the motivations of an alien species is incredibly difficult. And similarly, for any kind of artificial intelligence, it's unfathomable what its intentions may be. I mean, I would sort of question whether it would even be interested in traveling between the stars at all. If its primary goal is computation for the sake of computation, then it's probably going to have a different way of, it's going to be engineering its solar system and the nearby material around it for a different goal. If it's just simply trying to increase computer substrate across the universe. And that, of course, if that is its principal intention, to just essentially convert dumb matter into smart matter as it goes, then I think that would come into conflict with our observations of the universe, right? Because the Earth shouldn't be here if that were true. The Earth should have been transformed into computer substrate by this point. There has been plenty of time in the history of the galaxy for that to have happened. So I'm skeptical that we can... I'm skeptical in the part that's a behavior that AI or any civilization really engages in, but I also find it difficult to find a way out of it. To explain why that would never happen in the entire history of the galaxy, amongst potentially, if life is common, millions, maybe even billions of instantiations of AI could have occurred across the galaxy. And so that seems to be a knock against the idea that there is life else or intelligent life elsewhere in the galaxy. The fact that hasn't occurred in our history is maybe the only solid data point we really have about the activities of other civilizations.
Of course, the scary one could be that we just at this stage intelligent alien civilizations just start destroying themselves. It becomes too powerful. Everything's just too many weapons, too many nuclear weapons, too many nuclear weapon style systems that just, from mistake to aggression to, like, the probability of self-destruction is too high relative to the challenge of avoiding the technological challenges of avoiding self-destruction.
You mean the AI destroys itself, or
No,
will we destroy ourselves prior to the advent of AI?
As we get smarter and smarter AI, either AI destroys us or there could be just a million, like AI is correlated, the development of AI is correlated with all this other technological innovation, genetic engineering, like all kinds of engineering at the nanoscale, to mass manufacture of things that could destroy us, or cracking physics enough to have very powerful weapons, nuclear weapons, all of it. Just too much. Physics enables way too many things that can destroy us before it enables the propulsion systems that allow us to fly far enough away before we destroy ourselves. So maybe that's what happens to the other alien civilizations.
Is that your resolution? Because but the premise of the entire argument is that ancestor simulations are possible. So there's a contradiction that's been introduced.
There's that old quote: "We're all living in the sewer, but some of us are looking up at the stars."
This is maybe more true than we think.
But to me, so there's of course physics and computational fascinating questions here. But to me, there's a practical psychological question, which is, how do you create a virtual reality world that is as compelling and not necessarily even as realistic, but almost as realistic, but as compelling or more compelling than physical reality? Because something tells me it's not very difficult in the full history of human civilization. That is an interesting kind of simulation to me, because that feels like it's doable in the next 100 years, creating a world where we're all prefer to live in the digital world, and not like a visit, but like it's like you're seen as insane. No, like you're required. It's unsafe to live outside of the virtual world, and it's interesting to me from an engineering perspective how to build that, because I'm somebody that sort of loves video games, and it seems like you can create incredible worlds there and stay there, and it's a different question than creating a ultra high resolution, high fidelity simulation of physics. But if that world inside a video game is as consistent as the physics of our reality, then you can have your own scientists in that world that trying to understand that physics world. It might look different,
and presumably they'd eventually forget. Give it long enough, they might forget about their origins of being once biological and assume this was their only reality.
Especially if you're now born, well, certainly if you're born, but even if you were 8 years old or something when you first started wearing the headset,